Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're starting a new Maimah today. I had to find a Maimah that's not too long and not too short. So I chose a Maimah that's relevant to the times that we're in. This is a very historic 30 days that we're in right now. What I'm referring to is yesterday was the 15th of Sivan. The 15th of Sivan is the day that the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested in 1927. And this arrest was by the communist regime. But even more painful than that, it was by the Jewish communists. They were called Yev Section, which means the Jewish section of the communists. And these were young boys, and they were so much against Judaism that they did everything to uproot any trace of Torah, true Judaism in Russia. So they closed down yeshivas, they closed down the shuls, they closed down mikvahs, they tried to do everything. There should be no way of obtaining kosher food, there shouldn't be a bris milah. And naturally, the Frierdiker Rebbe was the one who set up a whole network all over Russia and was strengthening Yiddishkeit. Naturally, all these activities were done underground because they wouldn't allow it. But eventually, they saw that so much is happening, and they traced it back that the source of it all the spreading of Yiddishkeit, all the hidden yeshivas, all the underground things are coming from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and eventually they arrested him. And it's very painful to say, but the two boys who came to arrest him, they were young guys in their 20s. Both were boys that grew up in, or came from religious homes that are part of Chabad, and they became so corrupt that they were able to come with guns and arrest the Frierdiker Rebbe. So that arrest took place on the 15th of Sivan. And as soon as the Frierdiker Rebbe came there, already there was a nest, there was a big miracle. I'm not going to go into the whole story now. There's a book called The Prince in Prison. You can read, could read it, and I suggest that everyone should read it. It has all the details of the arrest and the liberation. But it was miraculous. And in the first 24 hours, right in the first few hours that he was there, his life was saved by a miracle. That night, they were sort of determined to uproot all sorts of religious activities in Russia. And they arrested 12 leaders of religion, different religions. And all of them were unfortunately executed that night. And that was the plan, Rahman al-Islam, with the Frierdiker Rebbe. They arrested him. They told him to go in a certain room. And the way the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote it, Ashgacha Pratis, there was a mistake. He went down a different corridor. But as a result of that, his life was saved. And then later, tremendous amount of pressure was being put on Russia from other countries, political pressure that they should release him. And eventually, 30 days later, he was released from jail. Before that, he was released from the jail on the day Gimel Tammuz, but he wasn't able to go home. He had to go to a city called Kostroma. And that city is a city where he'd be confined to that city. He's not he has to report to their headquarters once a week to show that he's there, and therefore they could monitor his movements. And the plan was that after 3 years, he'll be able to go home. And miraculously, he was there for 1 week, and a week later, he was able to go home, and that was the day of Yud Beis Tammuz. So these are two historic days in Tammuz, the 3rd of Tammuz and the 12th of Tammuz. The 3rd of Tammuz was the day that he went out of jail, but he was still confined to this city. And the 12th of Tammuz, a week later, is when he went out of any kind of restrictions and was able to go home. And this has become a yontif. And of course, in our generation, the same exact day, Gimel Tammuz, became the day of the Rebbe's passing and everything that means, which hopefully we'll not have to deal with it anymore. We'll have the Rebbe here in flesh and blood. We'll see with eyes of flesh. But we will spend some time to explain a little bit what the approach is supposed to be to Gimel Tammuz. But this Maimon that we're learning was sent by the previous Rebbe a year later. The first year after he was released from jail. The date was Tezvav Tammuz, the day that he was arrested. And page 1, we're not going to do page 1, but page 1 is a letter that he sent describing the circumstances, how he was arrested, and how he was released miraculously, and telling Hasidim to designate the day of the 12th of Tammuz as a yontif and to verbring the day to strengthen Yiddishkeit and strengthen the spreading of Torah and mitzvahs. And then he also sent a mimer to be studied. And the mimer is the one that we're going to be learning. It's on page 2. It starts with the words Asara Sheyoshvim. So the small little words right before the mimer, it says, this is to study Barabim in public, in groups, on the day of Yud Beis Tammuz, Peiches, which is, in the Hebrew, it was the year 5,688, which is 1928. The beginning of the mimer, these words are from Pirkei Avos. This is summertime, Tammuz. In summer, we are learning Pirkei Avos in the Shabbosim between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah. Let's start. Asara Sheyoshvim v'oskim b'Torah. When there are 10 people together, sitting and studying Torah, Shechina shruya b'neihem. The Shechina dwells amongst them. Shenema, as it's written, Elokim nitzav b'adas keil, that Hashem is standing in where the community is. Ve'ein Eda p'chusam asara. And Rashi explains the word Eda won't be used anywhere where there's less than 10 people. So we see from this that where there are 10 people, which is called an Eda, a community, Hashem is standing there, Hashem's presence is there. So if 10 Yidden are studying Torah together, Hashem's presence is with them. How do we know that even 5 people are studying Torah together? Hashem's presence is there. Shenemar, v'agudasei al eretz yisada. Agudasei, again, in the parentheses, he brings the commentary of Rashi and others, that aguda, the term aguda, which means a group together or a bundle together, is 5. When there's 5 things together, that constitutes the word aguda. So that means if there are 5 Yidden studying Torah together, then again Hashem is there. How do we know that even if 3 people are studying Torah together, Hashem is there? Shenemar, because it says the Kerev Elokim Yishput, that Hashem is found amongst the judges that judge. And Rashi says that judges are 3. The minimum of a bezdin is 3. There are larger bezdins, some that are 23, then there's 71, but at least 3 people have to be there in order for it to be a bezdin. And being that it says that Hashem is in the presence of the judges, that means that when 3 people study Torah together, Hashem's presence is there. And how do we know that even if 2 people are studying together, Hashem's presence is there? Shenemar, because it says another pasuk. Everything is based on the pasuk, a verse in the Torah. Oz nidbru yire havaya ish areyu. God-fearing Jews will be talking to one another. V'yakshiv Hashem v'yishma. Hashem will be listening to their conversation, to what they're talking. So that implies that there are two people, one talking to the other, and they're talking words of Torah. And it says here that when these two people are talking words of Torah, Hashem is listening, which implies that Hashem's presence is there. How do we know that even one Yid is studying Torah all by himself, that Hashem is there? Shenemar, because it says, in every place that you will only mention my name. And what does that mean? So Rashi says, she'eten das belibcha lahaskir shmi. I will put it into your heart that you should mention my name. Avei elecha, I will come to you. Ve'rachticha, and I will bless you. And elecha, to you, is singular. That means that even if one person is studying Torah, afilu gamim rak echad yeshiv v'esek b'Torah, one person sitting and studying Torah, harei mamshech gila lekus. He draws down godliness upon himself. So we know that if 10 people are learning together, 5 people are learning together, 3 people are learning together, 2 and 1, then there's a proof, evidence from a pasuk that Hashem's presence is there. Now the question is obvious. If one person studies Torah, Hashem is there, why do we need to bring proof that if 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 study Torah, if one person studies Torah, the Shekhinah is there? I don't need any proof for the other numbers. So obviously the answer is it's not the same. And that's what he's saying in the next line. There's a difference between the presence of the Shekhinah that's found when one person studies Torah, or the presence of Shekhinah that's found when 2 people study Torah. When 2 people study Torah, it's more. When 5 people study Torah, it's more. And when 10 people study Torah, it's more. And that's the point of the Mishnah, showing us how these numbers will warrant, bring down a higher, greater level of Shekhinah.
Slicha for the question. So 7 and 8 and 9 is Kal v'chomer. If 5 is okay, 7, 6, 7, 8 is the same, right? Or it's only those numbers?
Only those numbers. What does that mean? Just like we understand that when there are 10 people together, it's not only 1 more than 9. When 10 people come together, it's a whole different level of Shekhinah. And that's why we're not allowed to read from the Torah unless there's 10. We can't say Kaddish unless there's 10. We can't do the Kedusha unless there's 10. That means when there's 10 together, it brings in a whole new level of Shekhinah that's not there. So apparently, these numbers, number 2, 3, and 5, and 10, each one is a sort of a turning point in we've ascended to a whole different caliber. So even though when there's 6, 7, 8, 9, there's more people, but the fact that there's more people doesn't change, in a sense, the level of Shekhinah as a result of that. I just want to preface this by saying, generally speaking, the way we understand the differences, like we have this in other places as well. Shabbos is holier than the days of the week. What about Yontif? Yontif is also holier than the days of the week. But we say Shabbos is holier than Yontif, because Yontif you're allowed to cook, allowed to carry. There's so many things that we could do on Yontif, and Shabbos you're not allowed to do that. Then we have a day like Yom Kippur that we say there's even more holiness to Yom Kippur than Shabbos. And that's why Yom Kippur is called Shabbos Shabbosin. is the Shabbos of all the Shabbases. So Shabbos is holy, Yom Tov is holy, Shabbos is more holy, Yom Kippur is even more holy. Or the same as even with Svarim. Gemara is holy, and Chumash is holy, and every Sefer is holy, but there are halachas. You're not allowed to put the Gemara on the Chumash. The Chumash has more Kedusha. It goes on top of the Gemara. And there are other Svarim that I can't put that on top of a Gemara. So,
okay, but in the number 7 or 6, the 5 is there. So the holiness of the 5 is there, but it's not more. But
right, it doesn't bring us into a new category of holiness.
That I understand, but it's still Hashem is there, even if it's 6. Oh, okay, that was my question. That's all. Okay,
absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. So generally speaking, there's another explanation, which is brought down, and then we'll be able to appreciate what it says here. The ordinary explanation is that even though that Hashem's presence is in all these different places, but in some places Hashem is more revealed, and in some places Hashem is less revealed. That's the difference. In other words, when we say that this place has more holiness than another place, like we say in reference to the Beis Hamikdash, Eretz Yisrael, the whole land is called Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. So the soil in Eretz Yisrael is holy soil. But Yerushalayim has more holiness than all the other places in Eretz Yisrael. That's Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim itself, the mountain, Har Habayis, has more holiness than the entire city. And on the mountain itself, and so on, the Gemara says there are 10 levels. So generally speaking, the way we explain it is that in some places Hashem's presence is more revealed, in some places it's less revealed. The difference is in how revealed it is. And one of the ways to explain this, what does that mean? If it's revealed, it's revealed. If it's not revealed, it's not revealed. What does it mean, more or less? So the Alter Rebbe gives a mashal. And then mashal is from using the mashal of the mind and the memory. Imagine a person studies something, knows it well, knows it inside out, knows it by heart. If you stop the person and you ask him a question, he'll know the answer right away, everything that it says there. But right now, the person is thinking about a different subject, studying a different subject. So this subject that he knows inside out, is it in his head or not? If it's not in his head, then if you would ask him a question, he wouldn't remember. If it is in his head, but he's not thinking about it now, so where is it? And the answer is, it's in his head, but right now, it's not on the conscious part of his head, it's unconscious. But it's there. Like someone, for example, who knows brachas by heart, knows Ashrei by heart, knows the Shema by heart, but not thinking about this all day. So if I'm thinking about a totally different subject, is the Shema in my head? The answer is yes. In fact, there's a very beautiful mimer from the Alter Rebbe where he encourages people to study parts of Torah by heart. And he says, when you study something by heart, in a sense, it means it's written in your mind. It's like you have the Torah in your head. And if you have the Torah in your head, then you have Hashem's presence in your head. And he uses the example of why is there a halacha that you need to stand up when a Torah scholar walks into the room. And the answer is just like you stand up when a Torah scroll is brought into the room, we stand up when a Torah scholar walks in because in his head, you have the Torah. He knows the Torah, so it's sort of written in his head. What's the difference if it's written on a piece of parchment or it's written in the person's brain? So when you study something by heart and you know it, it's in your brain. Or in fact, any experience you had in life that you went through is in your brain, but you're not thinking about it. What does that mean? Is it there or is it not there? So the answer is it's there, but it's unconscious. Then we ask another question. How come there's certain information that if you ask a person a question, the answer is given immediately. There's other things that if a person asks you, you have to think about it for a minute or two, and then you remember. Why don't you remember right away? If it's in my head, I should be able to give the answer right away. If it's not in my head, then how do I get the answer 3 minutes later? So the answer is, it's in my head, it's in the unconscious, subconscious, but apparently it's deeper in the subconscious than the other information that I know right away. So because it's in my head, it's there. I just have to work a little bit harder to bring it up to consciousness. And there are certain things that 3 minutes won't help. I need a half an hour. I need an hour to think about it, work on it, try to remind myself, and then eventually I get it. In fact, there are many levels in the sort of layers of depth in the subconscious. And therefore, we can say that all these things are in my head, but some things are in my head closer to the surface. So I just snap my fingers and immediately it comes up. Some things in my head are further from the surface, so I have to make more of an effort. And some things are so deep that I have to work very hard to bring it up to the surface. The same is with Hashem's presence. Hashem's presence is everywhere. It's on the street, not only in a shul. But Hashem's presence on the street is hidden. In the language of Chassidus, it's behelim. It's in a sort of subconscious state. So for me to connect to Hashem and to feel his presence in the street is much harder. I have to work much harder to do that. A shul is a place where Hashem's presence is closer to consciousness. And over there, with a little bit of effort, I can bring up that awareness and that consciousness and feel Hashem's presence. In a place like the Beis HaMikdash, Hashem's presence is even closer to consciousness. And therefore, with even less of an effort, I can bring that up. So generally speaking, this would be the answer to the question when people ask, but Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is in everything. So how can we say this is holy, this is not holy, this is more holy, this is less holy? And the answer is, Hashem is everywhere, but in some places, Hashem's presence is more revealed, meaning closer to consciousness. Some places, Hashem's presence is more concealed. And that is a difference between something which is not holy and also the difference between things that are more holy or less holy. That's one answer. Then there's another answer, which he's going to talk about in this mimer, that it's not only a difference in consciousness, it's a difference in level. When we say that Hashem's presence is there, someone who doesn't study Chassidus has no idea that there are 4 spiritual worlds, and in each world there are 10 spheres, one higher than the other, and in each one of the spheres there are 10 spheres included, which means there are, in a sense, infinite levels in the world of Atzilus, infinite levels in the world of Bria, infinite levels in the world of Yetzirah. So when I say that Hashem's presence is here or there, what do I mean, Hashem's presence? Hashem's presence as it manifests in Atzilus, or as it manifests in Bria, in Yetzirah? In other words, a higher level of godly manifestation or a lower level. So the difference is not only in me feeling it and how much I'm conscious, but the difference is in the actual level of godliness. That there's certain things that come from a higher place. Higher means closer to the essence of Hashem. And there are certain places where the level of godliness comes from a lower place. It's godly, but from a lower level of godliness. And these are basically the 4 worlds and all the levels that exist in the spiritual realm. We know this with the word Seder Hishtalshelus, which means the order of the chain of the different worlds and the different levels. So one is higher than the other. So now he's going to explain that the same applies here. That when one person studies Torah, Hashem's presence is there, but it's not the same high level of godly light like when 2 people study Torah. And when 2 people study Torah, it's a higher level of godliness, coming from a higher spiritual realm. And when 3, it's even higher. And 5 is even higher. And when 10 people study together, the level of godliness, the realm of godliness that this is coming from is much higher than 5, 3, 2, and 1. What is it? That's what he's going to explain, and we'll learn that inside now. V'hainu, this means that when people study Torah together as a group, they draw down a level of godliness that's much higher. Let's compare this to davening. Shomer Azal, our sages say, Tfilas Rabim Eina Nemesis. The prayer of a Rabbim, which means when many people come together and they daven for someone, that kind of tefillah, or they daven in general, Eina Nemesis is not rejected by Hashem. Shenemer, it says, Hein Keil Kabir Layimos, that Hashem does not reject the prayers. And the Gemara says that this is referring to when people are davening with a minyan, with a group together. Why is that? It's the same Hashem, the same person, and yet if he davens as an individual, he might be rejected. If he davens with a minyan, there's more of a chance that his tefillah will not be rejected. What's the difference? Sharabim b'tfilosam. That means when people daven together with a minyan, mamshichim b'chines yud gimel midas harachman. They draw down Hashem's 13 attributes of mercy. We know that this idea of 13 attributes of mercy, yud gimel midas harachman, the source is in the Torah. Parshas Kisisa, the Jewish people committed a sin which is considered the greatest sin that was ever committed in history. They worship the golden calf. Every day in davening, or at the end of davening, we say 6 things to remember. And one of them is to remember this great sin that the Yidden committed in the desert. They worshiped the golden calf. And this sin was so severe that the consequences would have been extremely severe. And Moshe, being the faithful shepherd, turned to Hashem and he davened, and he begged Hashem that he should forgive them. And it says in the Chumash that he pronounced Hashem's 13 attributes of mercy. And when you pronounce and you draw down the 13 attributes of mercy, then no matter what the circumstances are, Hashem forgives you. In other words, in general, Hashem is chesed, Hashem is kind, Hashem is compassionate, but the general level of Hashem's kindness and compassion is limited. And that compassion is sort of measured according to your schus, according to your merit. So therefore, when I ask for Hashem's compassion, there's a judgment in heaven. Does the person deserve this compassion or not? Does he deserve a lot of compassion or a little compassion? Does he deserve a lot of kindness or a little kindness? Depending on the conduct of the person, his thought, his speech, his actions, what he did, what he didn't do. So imagine that the Yidden committed a sin, which is the Egel Azav, the golden calf, considered the greatest sin ever for many reasons. Besides the fact that they committed Avodah Zarah, it was idol worship. It's worse than that. They had just gone out of Egypt. Hashem showed him his kindness and his love, took them out of their misery. Hashem performed incredible miracles, one after the other. The 10 plagues in Mitzrayim. And in the Haggadah it says it wasn't just 10 plagues, it was really much more. Some opinions say there were 40, 50, 250 miracles that took place. The sea split. They had food coming down from Shemayim. They had the cloud. Hashem revealed himself in the most revealed way ever to ever happen in history, and it never happened again until Mashiach comes. And under those circumstances, to rebel and do something so not loyal to go and worship other gods. So it was such a grave sin. And therefore the consequences could have been very great. Moshe Rabbeinu accessed Hashem's infinite compassion. The Gimel Midas Rachamim is a different level of compassion. It's not limited, it's infinite. And therefore the compassion that comes from there is unconditional. That even if the worst kind of sin was committed, it could still be forgiven. And as a result of that, the Jewish people were forgiven. So basically, this means there's two levels generally of chesed. One is the ordinary level of chesed, and that's limited. And therefore, when it's drawn down in proportion to what I deserve. And Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim is something which is unlimited. It's infinite compassion, unconditional compassion. And even if a person is chas v'shalom in a situation where they committed such a grave sin, they will be forgiven.
So, and a person cannot bring it down himself, only a tzaddik, or a minion and up.
Right. So the greatness of a minion is that when we daven with a minion, we draw down Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. So just like this, yes.
We have a question over here.
Okay.
I was just wondering if it probably is an obvious question, but is it different from men and women when they daven? The level of kedusha.
That's an interesting question, because the basis for your question is that when women get together, it's not a minyan.
Right.
Rebbe once spoke about this, and he spoke about the fact that when 10 women get together, it also has the milah that it's much more powerful than if you do things on your own. So I guess the difference is that women, according to Chassidus, Kabbalah, are connected and their souls come from Malchus. Men, their souls come from Zoh, which are the 6 midos. So the men come from the masculine realm in the spiritual realm, and women come from the feminine realm. And that's why our neshamas have that difference. So when we say that men could constitute a minyan and not women, it means in order to have the ability to daven the way we daven, which is the Kedusha and Baruch Hu and reading the Torah and everything else, we have to draw down that aspect of Shekhinah that's drawn down through men. But the fact that women get together, even 10 women only, no men at all, are learning Torah together or doing a mitzvah together, it draws down a much higher level of Shekhinah than in ordinary circumstances. What level exactly? I'm not, knowledgeable to answer that question. But clearly, when 10 women get together, it has a certain quality that I want to learn. So just like when you're daven, you're drawing down the 13 attributes of mercy. When you study Torah together, you're also drawing down a higher level of godly light. And that higher level of godly light is also related to the 13 attributes of mercy. So now in the Maimon is going to explain how the higher level of light that's brought down when 10 people study Torah together is connected to and parallel to the higher light that's drawn down when 10 people daven together. Rabbi Shmuel says, this is the famous Bryce of Rabbi Shmuel, which we have in the Siddur, and we say this every day before we say Haidu. B'shloish esrei midas atei nedreshes. The Torah can be understood with 13 midas. There's 13 ways that we derive things from the written Torah, and from that we derive certain halachas that are found in the oral Torah. So we know that everything in the oral Torah is from Hashem, and it's given at Har Sinai, but it was given away in a way that the rabbis, the sages, have to look into the written Torah and derive it from there. So there are 13 ways, 13 paths, how we can derive things, 13 methods, if you want to use. How can we derive things from the written Torah, and that will become the halacha that's found in the oral Torah. So we say this every morning, that there are these 13 midos, 13 methods. And then he starts off, kal v'chomer, gzeir shaver, which means yesh gimel midas shebahem v'yodam mizgalus eira Torah. That means, in a sense, that there's certain 13 paths how the light of Torah could become revealed. Whatever is in the Torah, all the halachas. When you look in the Gemara, there are volumes and volumes of Gemara, and then there are hundreds and thousands, and probably by today millions and billions of pages of commentary from the greatest sages that ever lived. And all that is really from the Chumash, from the Torah. But in the Torah itself, it's hidden. In the Torah itself, very limited what we see, but it's hidden. This is hidden in an extra vav, and this is hidden in the extra yud, and this is hidden one way or another way, and that's what we find in Gemara. The Gemara shows us how we derive this information from that which is in the Torah, but it's hidden there. So that means that Hashem has given us 13 paths through which the hidden Torah, what's hidden in the Torah, could become revealed. The light of Torah is revealed through these 13 methods, which are like 13 paths. The Hainu, the Kol, Midah, Mayud, Gimel, Midas, Shatera, Medrashes, Bohem, each one of these 13 Midas through which we study Torah is Limud Chodesh. It brings something new in Torah that wasn't known before because it's hidden in the words of the Chumash. Kamai, for example, let's take the first one, Midah Rishayna. She Kal V'chomer. The first one of the 13, which is easy to understand, is called Kal V'chomer. Kal V'chomer means that if the Torah says something, and then we have a question about what would be in a different situation, and we say, wow, this situation is so much less or weaker than the other, and the Torah says it's not a good thing, so the other thing, which is so much more, is surely not a good thing. And one of the examples that are given, it doesn't say in the Torah that a man is not allowed to marry his daughter. It does say in the Torah he's not allowed to marry his daughter's daughter. So we derive from that, if you're not allowed to marry the daughter's daughter, certainly you're not allowed to marry the daughter herself. That's Kal V'chomer. The daughter's daughter is less related, a granddaughter. And yet the Torah says it's not allowed. So the daughter, which is more related, is certainly not allowed. And this is a method that's used in many, many places in Torah, how to derive a halacha. In Kain, Areza Mokar HaTorah, it means that the 13 methods are considered the source of Torah. Mashemegalim inyanim chadoshim b'yeser b'Torah. So that means that these 13, they reveal new things in Torah. Every one of the 13 reveals more things in Torah and breaks it down into more details. Because in the Chumash, we just have the general idea, but the details, what would be in this case or in that case or in the other case, in the third case, as we know that, people hear Shabbos as 39 malachas. So when you start learning Shabbos, there's no end. Hundreds and thousands of details of halacha, each one of the 39. So, and in the Chumash itself, it doesn't even say all 39. It just says, don't do work on Shabbos. And then the oral Torah derives from that altogether there are 39 malachas. And each one of the 39 has hundreds and thousands of details. So that's what the 13 things are. They reveal from the general and break it down to the details. The Tamadava, and the reason for this is Yud Gimel Midas HaTorah Nedrashes Behem Ein Keneged Yud Gimel Midas Rachman. So the Rebbe says that the 13 attributes of mercy, or rather the 13 methods of Torah study, are related to the 13 attributes of mercy. They're connected. And then the Rebbe is going to show how they're connected And therefore, from this we'll understand that just like when you daven with 10 people, you draw down not just Shechina in general, but you draw down a level which is 13 attributes of mercy, an unlimited level of godliness. So too, when you study Torah, there's a difference whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 5. When you study with 10 people together, this brings down a level of godliness that's definitely like Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim. But first, the point in the Maimer is to show that there's a connection between Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim, not only with prayer, but also with Torah. And then we can understand that just like with prayer, 10 people draw that down, the same thing with Torah, that when 10 people study Torah, they draw down Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim. And that's why it's such an advantage of people studying together as a group. Now you must be thinking right now, are we studying together as a group? We're not in the same room. But it's very clear from other sources. I mean, davening would be different, the halachas of davening, but in terms of learning, that if there are 10 people studying together, even though they might be in different places, but with the circumstance today, we can go to Chatchila River and we're able to have 10 people from different parts of the world studying together. It certainly has the advantage of what it says in this Maimer, and that draws down the Shechina, the Gimel Rachmim, with all its ramifications, as we'll see later in the Maimer. Okay, we'll stop here. And to be continued in Mir Hashem tomorrow.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.